Thank you so much. I see so many adoring glances in the audience. I think this is going to be a really friendly and beautiful session. I'm very delighted to be in conversation with you, especially because this book is the second of what seems to be forming like a new series, or I will say like a galaxy of sorts. And there is a family in it. And this is also the second conversation that we, the three of us, are having. And the first conversation I had with them was at another literature festival for the first book of the series.
Are we allowed to name other literature festivals here?
It doesn't matter.
Or is that banned?
Yeah, and that was during the COVID era. We had an online conversation. And so I read that, and so I was really surprised and delighted to see that this continues that. And actually, I have an inkling of what the third one's going to be as well, but I'll leave that for the end. But to begin with, I would love you to explain or introduce the family that inhabits or through whom the conversations emerge. You have talked about how, rather than non-fiction as a form, you use conversations and dialogues to bring out the topic. In this, we have Dharmaraj, you have Lopamudra, Mrs. Nachiketa, Gargi, and Anirban. 5 people. Can you give us just a general, is it a psychological... You did it?
Didi, you go ahead.
Either of you. Please
introduce
the characters of this series. Because I believe this set of characters is going to become more important in this body of work.
Absolutely. And I think Didi should answer.
Okay. So who's who?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mani. Lovely being here. Bengaluru. In India and Bharat. And Hindustan. The family. So, this needs a bit of a detailed answer. Amish and I, in the creative space, are a bit of a yin and yang combination. I'm the Prakriti to his Purush. I'm the feminine to his masculine. What do I mean by that? I'm a person of ideas. And these ideas can spill all over the place till speedily, probably even I wouldn't know what I'm saying and writing. Amish brings in the structure, the form, the discipline, and the accessibility. The manuscript originally was really one big manuscript of ideas, which was textbook-like, very academic. The creation of this family was Amish's genius. He created this wonderful family. These people are very real to Amish and I now. It's an old couple, Dharmaraj and Lopamudra, their daughter Gargi, and their son-in-law, Nachiket. The names are not accidental or casual. Nachiket and Dharmaraj. Dharmaraj is our Lord Yam, the god of death, as well as the god of Dharma. And Nachiket is the quintessential disciple. I think Nachiket would give a good competition to Arjun in terms of who's the more internalized disciple. The Lopamudra, the mother, is a great Rishika from the past. She was a great sage, a woman sage who wrote some mantras of the Rig Veda. She also wrote some Shakta mantras. She was the wife of Rishi Agastya from around this area. And it is believed that today she lives on in her reincarnated form as the river Kaveri, that 2 states are fighting over. 2 states are fighting over her today. The daughter, Gargi, is another great Rishika from our Upanishads. She was the feisty feminist of the ancient world. Gargi engages in a dialogue with Rishi Yagnavalkya on Atman and Brahman and life and all its manifest expressions in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. This is a charming family that Amish created.
And it's a contemporary modern family because they have
So the names have been inspired by ancient Upanishads, but they're set in the modern day. And the entire idea is why a structure like this? How many of you guys read non-fiction books? Yeah, very good number. Now, you'll notice that our structure of the way we look at fiction and non-fiction is defined more by the Western paradigm. Uh, a body of thought that emerged from Aristotle, but it's also informed by the Abrahamic approach to life, that there is one truth, everything else is false. If you don't follow this one truth, you'll burn in hell. Whereas the Indian approach, or most ancient pagan approaches, even in Europe, did not follow binaries. There were multiple points of view. Which is why you'll find the Western non-fiction book is usually, there's a hypothesis that the author puts up, and the entire book is to convince you about that hypothesis, and why all other hypotheses are wrong, right? This is not the way non-fiction was structured in the ancient Indian way, or even in the ancient Western way. How many have read the Upanishads? Any of the Upanishads? Yeah. You'll notice one common thing. I'm so delighted someone young is reading it. What's your name? Sorry? Purva. Applause for Purva. She probably not older than 20, 25, and she's read one of the Upanishads. Our future is good. Many more should read it. If you'll notice, one of the things around the Upanishads is usually structured as a conversation. It's not a textbook where the author has, this is the hypothesis, and I have to convince you of this hypothesis, and why every other hypothesis is wrong. So how Upanishads are structured, even the Bhagavad Gita, if you think about it, it's like a dialogue, right? And you'll have different points of view. And the text is liberal enough to show all points of view. And then leaves it to the reader to figure out, okay, you figure out what you think is the truth that works for you. This was the way it was in the West as well, the Socratic dialogues. The famous Socratic dialogues, which were written by Plato, were actually also conversations, but that structure kind of died out. So this is actually harking back to what the traditional Indian way of communicating philosophies was.
Yeah, exactly. And I wanted to point out how the entire argument actually doesn't move. Sometimes when I was reading some of the chapters, I was like, what's going on here? And then it's a little bit of movement, and then yet the dialogue continues. There is a sambhashan, there is a samvad, and I actually could pick, oh, maybe this person is the skeptic, and this person is the one who has the knowledge. You've divided personalities and philosophical points of view into like a model family.
It's a modern family set
and
in
it's
the
a modern
day.
era using ancient names and creating connections with heritage. Very interesting.
Thank you.
Very, very interesting. Yeah.
If I may, Mani, if you indulge me with the probably 2.5 more minutes. There is a skeptic, as you have said, and this is a modern name,
That's Anirban.
Anirban. The birth of Anirban is a very interesting story. We love to say that blessed are those authors who have a harsh critic in the editor that we find. Idols, the second manuscript, when it was ready, I had worked upon it first, and we sent it to our editors. And we got a massive pushback from the editors. It was very explicit, very harsh. I use the word harsh because a book is to an author what a child is to a parent. And the pushback was extremely, but no holding back. I was appalled. I turned to Amish. I said, what do we do? Almost at the germination stage of every idea, there is a very strong questioning. What do we do with this?
In a healthy way.
In a healthy way, but explicit and strong words. Amish said to me, Didi, why don't we put these words of the editor in the mouth of a character? Let's build another character. Let's build this character as the skeptic. And let's use these words verbatim in the mouth of this character, and then have the family answer these questions. Thus was born Anirban the skeptic.
Yeah. I'm glad to have mentioned that about the skeptic, so this comes out. But I do notice that Anirban is married to a non-Indian, correct? Or is it just a different religious person?
So she is half Thai, half Sikh.
Yes.
She's not present in Idols.
She is not,
She's an
but
idea.
I noticed how
She's
you
an
structured
idea.
that thinking process, that a person like that might be open enough too have maybe traveled, maybe
You're
have
right.
met somebody
You're
else,
right.
etc. So a lot of thinking has gone into this
Her name is
construction of the
Malivalaya.
psychology of this family. So now let's just jump right into the book. This book is called Idols,
Yes.
and if I may say so, you know, in poetry, often you have prefaces, of course, even in the old days, like the Apologia, you know, like the in defense of essay. This is in defense of an idea, right? Would you tell us what prompted you to think that this was necessary to talk about or to rationalize, explain, elaborate the idea of murti, puja, and idols, as you've called it? Would you tell us a little bit about the background? You've talked about some of the readers and audiences who asked those questions and in whose the response that you've given. I mean, I know the answer, I've read the book, but would you share it with the audience, please? Yeah.
Okay. Should I? Okay. How many of you would say that you are proud Murti Pujaks, a very proud idol worshipper? And how many of you would say, okay, how many of you would say, nah, idol worshipping, kind of stupid idea? How many of you would say that? A few. Thank you for your honesty. Many more are probably thinking that, but not raising your hand. And I was at a lit fest just like this, and most of my readers are the youth, are youngsters. Though I have, of course, readers from all age groups, but most of my readers are the youth. And at one such event, it wasn't the Bangalore Lit Fest, and I'll be polite and not mention the other Lit Fest. But one youth, a college kid, he got up and said, Amish, I love your books. I'm proud of my religion, but I'm obviously not an idol worshipper. So I said, why? Why aren't you an idol worshipper? Because he said, no, because obviously that's not God. You know, वो तो सिर्फ एक पत्थर है. He was with his friends. I didn't want to embarrass him. I said, okay, you know, get on to your main question. But that had remained in my mind. And we were discussing this, and there were various other incidents that happened as well. There was also this song, I don't know if you guys remember an old song, Patthar ki puja karke hari mein hari. Anyone heard that song? It was a big hit, you know, many decades back. If you think about it, we are among the last surviving idol worshipping cultures. And in our culture, a song like this was made, and listeners turned it into a huge hit, right? Why do idol worshippers within India think this way? When in ancient times, most of the ancient world was actually idol worshipping. And many of them died out. In fact, a fair thing to say is actually most of them were killed. They were massacred out of existence. India, Japan, to an extent China, among the last few who survived. I'm not, and there is of course a point of view within the idol rejecting cultures, which I respect. What I reject is them forcing their way on us, because we will not force our way on them. But why do idol worshippers not think through the philosophies of why they do what they do? I find so many kids, youngsters who will say, I just do it because my parents do it. And I'm an Indian kid, I don't want to hurt my parents, so I'm doing it, but I find it stupid. I don't know how many of the youth feel this way. My parents are doing it, I don't want to hurt them. Chalo, even I'll do it.
Usually it's, I'm not into rituals.
I'm not into rituals. I'm spiritual, not religious.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone has heard this line. I'm spiritual, what religious, not religious. I always ask, what does that mean? I don't get a clear answer. But you'll notice idol worshipping, there are faults in idol worshipping as well, don't get me wrong. But there are intuitive strengths. Intuitive liberalism comes naturally with idol worshipping. Intuitive environmentalism comes naturally because the earth is not a resource to be exploited, it's a goddess to be worshipped.
And the clay murtis, for
Exactly.
example.
Yeah. So, but why do we not think through these philosophies? Why do we not realize the power of this philosophy? I think there's a, and we mentioned this in the book. Has anyone heard of the battered wife syndrome? Anyone has heard of it? Do you know what it is? Battered wife syndrome? Yeah, it's what happens. It's a psychological concept actually. Women who sadly suffer beatings at the hands of their husbands many of them actually start rationalizing it, thinking it's their fault, right? That their husband beat them. You know, maybe I said the wrong thing. That's why he got angry and beat me. Maybe I put extra salt in the food. That's why he got angry and beat me. And if a friend comes and tells that woman, no, it's not your fault, it's the husband who's wrong, they get angry with that friend, right? It's called the battered wife syndrome. And I think many idol worshippers exhibit a version of the battered wife syndrome. That for 2000 years we've suffered so many attacks, we ourselves start thinking there must be something wrong in it. Once again, I'm not rejecting the idol rejectors approach. There is, and we had that in India too, but they never went around killing idol worshippers.
So if I can
We
sum
need
up,
to just bring up the philosophy of this and why we are such proud idol worshippers, why it preaches intuitive liberalism, intuitive respect for women's rights, intuitive respect for environmentalism, and we just want to bring this up.
so in a sense, I mean, the way I would sum it up is that it's a restoration of our own pride in our own ways and practices.
Understanding the knowledge
or,
of it. Yeah.
To increase an understanding of why the practice occurs and to create a connection between heritage and the future.
And your practices. Don't
something
just
like
do
that.
it. Don't just do it because your parents are telling you to do it.
Yeah, but
Do
think
it
about
because
how
you
this actually
you find
works.
the logic in it.
Yeah.
Dave, if you want to.
If I might add a bit to this discussion, it is a bit of a restoration of the ways of the world, actually, not just India. In our foreword, we've written the reasons why we've written this book. One, of course, was what Amish related. There was another incident. We had a friend over for dinner once, and midway through the discussion, she got quite hot under the collar and said, why do you keep saying idol worshipping, idol worshipping? We are not idol worshippers. We are murti pujaks. There's a difference. You see, because we do pran pratishtha. There's a difference. We're different from those that existed in the past. I think it's a very tragic thing to have said.
It's a vocabulary thing. It's a language thing also because the word, the phrase idol worship got that reputation through
Unfortunately.
the lens of a different culture. Yeah.
Unfortunately, because the entire planet indeed was idol worshipping, and I would go so far as to say they were murti pujaks as well. If we read the Book of the Dead of the ancient Egyptians, they were called Kend. The Book of the Dead is full of detailed rituals and tariqas as to how the gods and goddesses of ancient Egypt should be worshipped. The oracle worshipping rituals of ancient Greek were indeed extremely detailed, diligent, and respectful. They too had their rituals, their ceremonies, and this, in some sense, is a tribute to those dead cultures who only exist in museums today. Athena and Zeus no longer rock the boat of the Greeks the way Ganeshji and Lord Shiva still do
It's
in
very,
India.
very living right here. And I mean, I will use that opening to let the audience know that there are a lot of inserts or in this book, information in boxes in which you cover Greek mythology. There's information about Athena and Osiris and various
Narcissus,
other,
the demigod of
well.
narcissism
Yeah, you have
itself.
a lot of interesting stories and from many other cultures in this, kind of running parallelly to the family discussion. Now, coming back to the topic itself, would you tell us, I think you gave 3 reasons why Murti Puja or idol worship is a constructive or holistic process, which the last point was self-understanding. But I think before that you also had a couple of other points. Would you be able to just finally tell us about the self-understanding part? That's the part I'm more interested in now.
Self-understanding, you know, I think Didi can speak beautifully. Let me speak about liberalism. And the intuitive liberalism that comes with this approach. There's this organization called Pew Survey, right? Which had done a survey in 2020 and surveyed across all religious groups. And it asked the religious groups, do you agree that all religions are true? and not just your religion. Vast majority of, I know what, close to 85-90% of the what are called the dharmic religions, Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism, said yes, all religions are true. And what I used to discuss with my friends, I was living in the UK at that time. Over 90% of Indian Muslims and Indian Christians also said all religions are true. Okay. They didn't say that only their religion is true, which is very different from what, say, a similar religious group in Europe or the Middle East may have said. Over 90% of Indian Muslims and Indian Christians said they believe in the concept of karma and dharma, right? Which is actually a dharmic concept, right? Over 90% of Indian Hindus said they are happy to go to the worship places of other religions as well, not just their own. And you can find evidence of this across. You don't need the Pew survey to tell you. In our puja room at home, of course, we have murtis of our Ishta Devta. So in my puja room, it would of course be Lord Shiva in the center. My wife is a Jain. My wife Shivani is here. She's a Jain. Loud round of applause for her, please. Okay. She's a Jain.
I like that.
So she's
I
a
should use it
Jain.
next
So
time.
we would have, of course, Rishabdev and Mahavir. But in our puja room, we have other Hindu gods and goddesses. We also have Gautam Buddha. We have Guru Nanak. We have a lovely Byzantine painting of Mother Mary and Jesus Christ. We have the Star of David. We have the Kaaba. Now, if I say this in India, no one will find it odd. Because it's normal. What's the big deal?
It's
right?
normal. I mean, yeah.
I say this I'm not just talking about the usual suspect countries. Even in Europe or in the US, if I say this at a Lit Fest, people will say, but how can you do that? You're a Hindu. How can you have Mother Mary out there? How can you have... And this is not uncommon. I'm sure Venkateshwara temple is in the south. You can Google those beautiful images of Muslim women in burqas praying at a Venkateshwara temple. Right? This is the Indian way. This is what genuine liberalism is, which is mutual respect. One of the things I found in Europe is often those who claim to be liberal are not actually liberal. Because I had this heavy debate with a self-proclaimed liberal at Guardian newspaper, and in London. She was justifying the invasion of Libya. Okay. No, that Europeans were trying to create a liberal country in Libya. And therefore, we invaded them. It's just that it wasn't implemented well. I couldn't wrap my head around this concept. You claim you're a liberal, and you killed a few 100,000 people to prove your liberalism. How the hell is this liberal? Right? And many Western liberals, my thing is, actually, they are not actually liberal. Because they don't understand the concept of mutual respect. Indians understand it intuitively. And I think a large part of it is because we are idol worshippers. What is,
How is because we are
what
idol
is a Sufi
worshippers?
dargah? What is a Sufi dargah? You're seeing the divine in there. Like, look, the difference, the key point of idol worshipping is you see the divine in everything. You don't say that divine is exclusive. That there is one male God who exists outside of the universe, and the universe itself is profane and a product of original sin and guilt. That is an extremist idol rejector approach.
Helps you change your mindset.
Because you see the divine in everything, you intuitively become liberal. Everyone knows what this word is? Namaste. How does it translate as? What is the translation? It's not hello. Perfect. Applause for him. Many Westerners translate it to mean hello. That's not what it actually means. It means I bow to the divine within you. Think of the beauty of this concept. I recognize that the divine is within you as well. That's what namaste actually means. All of us Indians do it across all religions, which is why we become intuitively liberal, because the philosophy at the heart of idol worshipping is that I see the divine in everything. Which is why we are natural environmentalists as well. Because we see the divine, we don't just say Kaveri, we say Kaveri Amma, right? Because we see the divine in the river as well. We say Ganga Ji. Yeah. It makes us natural environmentalists. That is the heart of idol worshipping. I see the divine in everything. I don't think the universe is profane.
No,
and that the divine is
I
outside
love this
of
concept, and I really put all my good wishes towards this to become broader, and so let the concept of Ganga Ji also go towards making the river
Indians
more
should
clean.
spread this message across the world. A good way would be to read a book.
Yes. Do you want to read some excerpt from it, or can I? Do you want to discuss more from it? I mean, yeah. One small point I'd love to make in terms of a connection is that the idea of multiple religions is so Indian. I come from a place where there is a Sarvadharma Stupa. I mean, it's in Puttaparthi, where all the religions and dharmas are presented on the same platform. And the meaning of secular, actually, in our country is multi-religiosity. In fact, people understand
Sarvadharma,
when people call themselves secular, actually they mean multi-religious, but that's not the case internationally. As I had to learn when I went to the USA and did my PhD there, the usage of the word secular is different internationally than it is in India. So we have a very unique way of approaching this. And in the book, you really bring that out. I think in interesting logical phases, you start with pravritti and nivritti, the inward movement and the outward movement. Then you go on to pravritti, and then you talk about the idol worship and make the connections with the international, the global, and the meaning.
And guys, it's all presented in the form of an easy conversation. Anyone can get it. You don't have to know our ancient texts or know Sanskrit to understand it. Sorry, go ahead.
Yes, that's right. And then, by the way, slowly, I find that there is a unity kind of theme that comes out. In fact, I mean, then later on, I looked at the cover, I'm like, this is called idols. But the whole theme of the book is actually about unity. Am I right?
Absolutely.
I mean, or rather, it sort of gravitates towards that.
A much used phrase, but very deep in its connotations, unity in diversity.
Yeah. And I mean, you've talked about coming back to Christianity. Lord Jesus resonates with grace, love, forgiveness, sacrifice. You've appreciated Sufi Islam. You've quoted from...
The entire point of mutual respect is very critical.
Yeah.
And
no,
in this is one of the things I think that has to be understood. One-way respect is not sustainable. For example, I am happy to respect all religions. But if someone keeps insulting, for example, keeps insulting Lord Shiva, there will come a time when I'll react.
Yes.
Right? Because one-way respect is not sustainable. It's the Nash equilibrium, right? Prisoner's dilemma. It must be mutual respect, which in the Indian way comes intuitively, sadly not so common outside India, and perhaps India can teach this to the world.
So when you talk about how bhakti, you differentiate between bhakti that is connected to fears and desires and trapped by ego from another bhakti which is more transcendent than that. Would you like to talk about that? Because you're talking about this perfect ideal world in which you're explaining idol worship, and then the concept of bhakti comes in, and you do acknowledge that in Dharmaraja's words, no less, that bhakti is connected to fears and desires and trapped by the ego. Can you illuminate that? Yeah. Why did you have to go there?
At a very basic level, idol worshipping can access solace, we can access hope, we can access some sort of, an assuagement in the business of living. At a greater level, actually, idol worshipping can be a source of or a portal to self-understanding itself. How does this work? We don't access what we want to or we choose to, but what we can. We are different. And the means of worship and the means of what we draw from these concepts are also, it's a menu-based kind of a phenomenon.
Menu-based?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let me exemplify that. Physics has a concept called harmonic motion. Any physics person here? No physics person?
One back there.
Is it possible to hand you the mic so that you can tell us what
What is harmonic motion?
is?
Or you can just speak it out loud.
Absolutely. Yes, you're right. Harmonic motion can best be understood by, we were all taught this in school. Soldiers are asked to not march in unison when they cross a suspension bridge. They are told to break step because if you march in unison, then the soldiers emanate a certain frequency. Suspension bridges also have a certain frequency. And if the frequency of the marching soldiers and the suspension bridges are similar, then there's a great increase in amplitude and vibration, and the suspension bridge would collapse. Sorry? Yes.
Resonance.
Yes.
Perfect.
Resonance.
Applause
resonance.
for her. You were paying attention in school physics class. Oh, you're a teacher.
Thank you for that lesson. But Bhavna, conceptually, can you take it into a concrete example? Tell
Yes,
us
I'm
about
going there.
Shiva
I'm
and
going
Krishna
there.
and so on. Yeah.
I'm going there. Our emotional world is similar. We seek resonance. We seek a mirroring of our own emotional architecture. What is this business of falling in love? In a world populated by millions and billions of people, there is one human being who inexplicably rocks your boat because you find a resonance. You find that resonance. We have talked about the concept of the Ishtadevata. Yes. Ishtadevata is the concept of the chosen deity. And we do not choose our deity so much as our deity chooses us. There is this inexplicable pull that you feel towards a certain Devi or a Devata. Let me give you an example. My mother, and I will come back to this at the end of what I have to say to link it to Indian Islam. But my mother is a great goddess worshipper, Ma Durga. Durga Ma never quite attracted me from my childhood. My Ishtadevata in my growing years was Lord Shiva. Always Ma Durga for my mother and Lord Shiva for me. Except for 2.5 years in my life when my husband fell ill. He fell ill and Ma Durga started pulling me. I would go to Ma Durga and I would pour my fears, my anxieties, my desperation, my helplessness on her able shoulders and her joli, and drain myself of these overwhelming emotions and then come back home and to fight jointly this great battle that my husband and I fought. Cancer is beyond an illness. I don't know what to call it. It's a war. I lost my husband in 2018 after a 2.5-year battle. And Ma Durga left my hand because she knew I don't need her anymore. My head does not try and wrap itself around what happened to me in those 2.5 years and try and understand it with my neofrontal cortex and my left brain, the logical brain. My heart knows. Ma needed me. I needed Ma those 2.5 years, and she was there for me. To close the circle, Ma has always worked for my mother. She's a great goddess worshipper. We are 4 siblings. I'm the eldest, the bully. I have a brother called Amish, 2 years after me.
Choti Ma.
Choti Ma. And then there are the twins who are 8 years younger than me, Amish, and his twin, Ashish. And yes, I'm a bit of a Choti Ma to the twins, barely a sister or a mother. We lived in a hick town called Kansbahal in our childhood years, around 35 kilometers away from Rourkela. We were in Mumbai first, and then my father was transferred to Rourkela, Kansbahal actually. So the older two, Anish and I, were sent to boarding school. The younger two were too young to be sent. In the later years, they too were sent to Lawrence School, Lovedale. Now, when Anish and I would come down for our winter holidays, it would be celebration time in the family because the entire family was together. And every weekend, Sundays, we would wend our way to Rourkela, 35 kilometers away, in our ambassador jalopy, which was named Dhanno from Sholay. And we would spend a lovely day throughout, go swimming, have dinner, catch a movie, and then on our way back home, late in the night, every second or third week, my mother would signal to my father near a small Tarnima temple en route to Kansbahal. My father knew what to do. He would stop the car, and 6 of us would troop into the temple. My father and the boys would do their darshan and then leave the temple, knowing what was to come. I remained beside my mother, and my mother would break down. Every single time she would break down, she would cry her heart out. She would bawl and bawl and bawl. And I remember I must have been 11 or 12 years old. I would stand beside her and experience sheer anger at the goddess. Why is she making my mother cry? My mother would do her thing, and then we would troop out, and she would, like quicksilver, she would transform into her usual vibrant, positive self. We left Kansbahal over 45 years ago. To this day, in Kansbahal, we had an uncle Iqbal who used to work with my father. And every once in a while, he came home to tutor the twins in mathematics. To this day, once a month, Uncle Iqbal calls up my mother and says, Bhabhi, dengi de di maa ko, aapki taraf se. Last month, he said to her, Bhabhi, you have to come to Rourkela, because all these years, these decades, I'm the one who's visiting Ma and chadhaving the chadhava on your behalf. It has to be your money, not mine. And Mummy said, Iqbal, your money is my money. It's all right.
Interesting. I mean, I feel so moved by your story. I don't actually like what you said about Ma Durga, because I'm feeling Ma Durga a lot lately, and I don't like the outcome of what you just spoke about. Certainly we experience deities and their forms, their different, various forms at different times. In the book, you have talked about Nataraja and the different symbolism and the meaning of what is under Nataraja's foot and Shiva in the yoga posture. It's really fascinating to have this kind of information, because usually we don't. We see icons, like in Navratri. You have 9 different forms of Devi, and they may be little compendiums about what color goes with what day, what dessert goes with what day, etc. But there is information actually in the hymns. There is a lot of information in the hymns, and all that information is not accessible to most people.
We've forgotten many of those symbols.
Yes, yeah.
Look, what Dee said is right. At a heart level, you connect to the Murti,
Yes.
and gives you peace. So I'm by nature a slightly rebellious, anti-elitist kind of guy. So for me, obviously, Lord Shiva is an attractive god, right? And I'm sure would be for many out here. But my elder brother is a compliant guy who likes order, who likes stability. So obviously he finds Lord Ram attractive. So at an emotional level, we find different things. But those stories don't just appeal to the heart; they appeal to the mind as well. You get symbology, you get philosophies, which then you can apply in your life. If you're a rebellious person, what are the kind of things you should be aware of? What are the risks in your way of life? What are the strengths of your way of life?
Do you think you'll move on?
No, no. I am obsessed by Lord Shiva.
Who knows?
Okay, so this
Okay,
is
if
interesting.
we have-
I think we
yeah.
have time for questions.
Yeah,
Yes,
of course.
I'm just getting
Yeah.
we have 5 more minutes to talk
Okay.
about. Okay, so then may I point to, shall I just take a little conjecture on your third book?
Okay, good.
Okay, so there's a part in this where you talk about how religions that started with political goals developed a mystical stream, And religions that began in mysticism developed a political something. And I think in one other place, I've actually marked it, I'm not going to find it now, what the exact line. Is that what your next book is about?
It's certainly one of the projects.
It is one of the. It is one of the projects. We have a somewhere building on this. We have a theory for how India's elite groups are structured. And it's actually not about religion. It's about what are the core philosophies that define different groups.
Fascinating.
And how perhaps we can find a way to find common ground. It's very important. One of the things I strongly feel, this is perhaps one of the best times in many centuries to be an Indian. We have a chance that our ancestors didn't have because they were just fighting desperately for the right to stay alive, right? And at times in the last 1,000 years, we did get those opportunities. Often we lost because of internal divisions. Enemies didn't need to defeat us, we would defeat ourselves. And that's one of the things I strongly feel. Whatever the differences we have, we must debate. We are Indians, we are argumentative. But never let it go beyond into divisions.
Yes, I mean, stay within the samvad of the family.
Yes, yes. And we are exploring these different elite groups and how it could work, how we could find that unity. There's this lovely line in UP that Kaurav saw or Pandav Panch, Tija aaye to 105. That there may be 100 Kauravs and 5 Pandavs. But if an outsider comes, we're 105. Okay? Now, I'm not saying who are the Kauravs, who are the Pandavs. Okay? I'm just saying we Indians should not make the mistake that our ancestors made. How many Maharashtrians here? Yeah. One of the things our ancestors were never lacking in bravery. We're the only pre-Bronze Age culture that is still alive. Our ancestors were tough. Okay, they led the greatest resistance that any society has ever seen. But often our biggest faults was internal divisions. The Maharashtrians out here, have you heard of Kanoji Angre? Yeah? Raise your hands, who's heard of Kanoji Angre? Any non-Maharashtrians who's heard of Kanoji Angre? Yeah? He was an admiral. He led the Maratha Navy, among the greatest navies of that era. Right? He was defeating the Europeans as well. How was Kanoji Angre's great navy destroyed? He was fighting the Europeans at one end, but behind him he was fighting his fellow Marathas. Yeah? Okay. That's how the navy actually got destroyed. And that's how the Europeans started controlling our seas and we lost. And there are countless examples like this. Internal divisions is what has messed India up repeatedly. Have debates, but so we want to explore this book of different elite groups, how they compete with each other, and it's not such an obvious division, and how we could find a way to at least have the broad rules. Ki bhai, have internal debates, but tija aaye to 105. It should be that way.